So that's the case for people who think, oh, I'm just not creative. I'm just not blessed with this talent. I don't have one creative bone in me. And that's impossible, because if you are a human being, then you are creative, you are inherently creative, and you have access to this huge potential of creativity. Do you ever feel like you're meant to be a creative and to be a creator, but something is blocking you? It is always a struggle to create, and you remember how it feels to be in a state of flow and to create from it, but at the same time it's really hard to get to the state of flow and to create freely. And you cannot figure out why, you cannot figure out what is blocking you, and somehow creativity is elusive for you. So if this is the case for you, I know the feeling, I've been there, and I'd like to share in these videos some tools that really shifted my relationship with creativity and allowed me to access a state of flow pretty much anytime I want it. This applies to any act of creativity, from painting to writing to maybe even start your YouTube channel to share your voice with the world. And if you do feel like creativity is your call, but you cannot access it, I think you might be right. It might be true that creativity is your call, that creativity is the medicine that you're here to share with the world. And so it is very, very important that you learn how to access it and how to express it. So to start, I'd like to give you a little bit of my personal story to understand where I come from. So I've been always drawn to art, and for me it was mainly painting and drawing. And growing up, I've had the chance to go to an art high school, which in Italy is quite common. And my caregivers kind of pushed me towards art. And I think, well, this is due to many reasons, but for me, the point was that I thought I wasn't really good for anything else than art. And this is the case for a lot of other people, because I remember a lot of classmates being kind of lost and not really knowing what to do with themselves. And this, for a lot of these kind of people, going to an art high school allowed them to basically just sit around in a way and not feel too much pressure for failing in maths and classical studies or other things like that, because we didn't have so much of those things. We had very basic maths and physics and history and philosophy compared to other types of high school. So it was an easy high school for people who maybe didn't believe so much in themselves, or maybe didn't have the cognitive abilities to study as much or in a way that society expects us sometimes to study. So after art high school, I went to the Academy of Fine Arts in Venice. And there I had kind of like a similar state of mind where I didn't know what else to study. For my parents, it was really important that I would study. And for me, I kind of wanted to postpone working full-time as much as I could. So I thought, okay, I'm gonna study art. But I remember I used to think, I'm not gonna be an artist. I don't study art to become an artist because that's way too much pressure, way too much exposure. I couldn't deal with it. And I remember also observing other people and comparing myself to them. So for me, it was always really, really quite hard to have an artistic, creative idea. It felt always like a real struggle. I sometimes was making really nice things, but it would take me so much effort. And to get in the state of flow was very, very difficult. Most of the times it felt like I was working against something rather than in a flow state. And I was looking at other students, and some of them, not all of them, of course, but some of them were just so prolific with their creativity, and they were just casually doing so much work and so much art, and they enjoyed it and they found it easy, or at least it looked like it. And then they also had energy to socialize and study and do other things and work sometimes, and I was amazed at these people. How do they do it? It almost felt like they were drawing energy from being creative rather than consuming all their energy in trying to be creative like I was doing. What I used to think was, I'm just not talented enough like these people. I'm not blessed by nature like these people are, and there's not so much I can do. I'll just keep going until I graduate, basically, and then I'll see what to do. And then after I graduated, I worked for a little bit and I started traveling. And when I started traveling, I got in touch with people who allowed me to express my creativity a little bit more, or facilitated a relationship with my own creativity that was a bit more positive. But until last year, I was still blocked in some ways. I was still judging myself really harshly and finding it really hard to get in a flow state and even to practice, because I was thinking I would love to draw more, but then I would get to a blank piece of paper and just freeze. And what to do? So last year, something happened. My life changed completely. I went through quite a hard time, and by coincidence, I found this tool, this way, this technique to access my creativity. And right now, it feels like it's unstoppable. But not only it feels like it's unstoppable, it feels like it's easy. So I'm sure that sharing this could help somebody. And I see sometimes other creators online sharing their techniques, how to access your creativity, how to practice more. And people tend to say you have just to practice and practice and practice. Yes, but if you are in a blocked state, it's not easy to practice. It doesn't come easy. And then you have to recover from your own practice because it was exhausting. And if you know what I mean, then keep watching, because I'm going to share now what I did to get out of this blockage, to deal with it. Before I share with you the process that I'm using, I would like to define what creativity is for this video. So creativity for me is the ability to make a choice after the other, not only in art. So in art, for example, we choose what colors to use, what kind of paper to use, or what kind of medium to use. We choose what shapes to draw and things like that. And it's a constant decision making. The thing is that sometimes it doesn't come easy. So if we are in a state of flow, this comes super easy, and the decision seems like the most natural thing, and it's very satisfying. And other time, it doesn't really happen. So of course, with practice, we can learn to unblock it and to take decisions a bit more quickly and with more mastery. So for example, I know now, because I practiced, that this color is the right choice. But at the beginning, it can be really difficult. And then another part of the definition of creativity is that is some sort of dialogue with this force, this entity called inspiration, which feels, when you have inspiration, when you feel inspired, it feels like you're channeling some sort of divine presence or divine power that aids you and guides you into this decision making, this constant decision making and problem solving. So with inspiration, it feels like we become this conduit, this medium from which or through which an idea passes and materializes in the world. And it is highly satisfying when we can do that. And then the third point is creativity is a human need and a fundamental human trait. So I think as an animal species, human beings are some of the most creative, or the most creative maybe, animal species. Creativity is really one of our main qualities and one of the things that sets us apart from other species of animals, or in general of life. So this is why I think every single human being has access to a creative power. In terms of it being a human need, I like the analogy that Liz Gilbert does in her book Big Magic, that I have somewhere, where she says that creativity is like a border collie. If you don't stimulate it and exercise it, it will make great damage. So it is true. It feels like if you have this desire for creativity, and you cannot express it for whatever reason, it feels like it destroys you from the inside, doesn't it? So for me, creativity is not only like a border collie, it's like a wild animal, and it can be very elusive, especially inspiration. The inspiration part of creativity can be quite elusive, and it's easily scared off. So our relationship with creativity needs to be a practice where I think we learn to gain its trust. Kind of like the fox in The Little Prince. We learn to have a relationship with it and make creativity feel respected. To attract it to us, we have to make it feel valued and appreciated, but also respected, and we have to understand how to respect it. So now we get to the point. The one thing that I think scares creativity away is the inner critic. So for me, this was the case. I know it might be not this for everyone, so everybody will have their own situation, but I feel like for a lot of people, the inner critic is really blocking their creative flow, their access to their basic, fundamental human quality of creativity. So the inner critic is a part of us and is a part of our ego particularly. So it can be dealt with in a way. It can be, I don't like saying dealt with, but it can be faced, let's say, doing parts work. So our inner parts are like psychological sub-personalities that we have. So we are called individuals, but that means not further divisible, but actually we are further divisible. So each of us has different parts within them, within ourselves. And the inner critic is, I think, something that exists in everyone probably. And it is a part of us that is formed through experience. So very often the inner critic voice sounds very much like the criticism that we received growing up. So if we had, I don't know, teachers or caregivers or siblings that criticized us a lot, probably our inner critic voice is very strong. In the same way, it's not only what we experience directly, but if our caregivers had a very strong inner critic, as children we could sense it, and we can inherit it in some ways. So the inner critic is an important part of us, and what as creatives we tend to do and to suggest to each other is try to not listen to your inner critic, try to move forward, keep practicing, don't listen to this voice. And the voice sounds kind of like this. What the hell is this? What are you even trying to do? How disappointing you are. Hey, you don't want to continue. People are going to say this shit. You're going to fail, so you should not even start and prevent yourself some very unnecessary pain of realizing you're not worth anything as a creator. Please spare the world from birthing this insufferable thing. So this is this is something that I wrote when I was let's say doing some part work with my inner critic, and I don't know if this resonates with you. It sounds very rushed, but at the end of the day, it is what came up for me. And often is not even, when I experience the inner critic voice, is not even so clear. So it doesn't really speak with words, but it's more like a feeling. And the feeling kind of sums up these words that I just said. So this inner critic voice can be very, very rough and can really stop us, of course, because it doesn't say very nice things. The realization that the inner critic is not you. So the inner critic is a part of you, is not you as a whole, and it's a part of you that is scared and is trying to protect you. Is not a part of you that means any harm, even if it is quite damaging at the end, but is afraid, is a wounded part of you and is trying to protect you from pain that comes from the outside. By giving you pain from the inside, of course, and preventing you to exposing yourself from the pain that you might get from the outside. So the thing with dealing with the inner critic is we need to make it feel safe enough that it wants to back off. Because its job is not pleasant. Even if it's been working really hard, it can get to the point where it learns to trust you, to trust that we are not in danger and simply back off. I'll show you now how to do it exactly, how to have a dialogue with the inner critic so that it feels safe enough that it wants to back off. So let's get into it. To do part work and speak to your inner critic, you want to set up a situation like a theater play. You need to act, to be three parts of you. So the first part of you is, of course, the inner critic. The second part of you is the part that your inner critic is stopping, so your creative self. And often your creative self is kind of overlapping with your inner child, because your inner child has direct access to creativity and to self-expression, and it's innocent and spontaneous and playful. And this is the traits that you want to bring back, that you want to be able to express without the inner critic stopping you. So you have the inner critic, the inner child, and then your core self. Your core self as in not your ego. So it's not the part that you learned, that you formed with experience, is the part that you are beyond all the experience that you had. So it's the part that knows no ambitions, no fear, no shame, and it acts with all your parts, all your sub-personalities. It acts like a compassionate leader, and it listens to everyone, and it gives space to everyone. Is a part that is kind of beyond all that, in a way. Is the observer that Eckhart Tolle speaks about. So you're gonna have these three parts, and I would recommend physically moving. So I have 3 pillows on the floor, and I change them when I want to change part. And then the way I do it is I write, because speaking doesn't really work for me. Writing really makes me in touch, makes me get in touch with these parts of me. So I write, and each part gets a name. So I ask, okay, what's your name? My name is blah, blah. So basically I'm just open to whatever comes up for me. I don't try to direct the conversation at all. But I do ask, for example, what would you like me to know? If I'm in the part of the self, I ask my inner critic, what would you like me to know? The first time I did this exercise, I wrote a lot, because the inner critic had a lot to say. And it turned out the inner critic was just really scared that my other part, the inner child, would get exposed to criticism from the outside. And the inner critic was saying, it's very dangerous to expose yourself to do anything that could expose yourself to judgment from other people. It's very dangerous, you don't want to do it, please don't do it, it makes me super afraid. So basically the inner critic showed me how fearful they were. And in that moment, it lost power for me, you know? I just saw it from what it was, some wounded, weak part that was just trying to protect another part of me. And then the inner child also spoke, and it was very confused about why they couldn't express themselves, but they were trying to behave, they were trying to be good, to not upset anyone, so they didn't want to upset the inner critic. Therefore, they were not trying to get in touch too much with their creativity and their desires for exploration and play. And they were letting the inner critic fencing them off. So this is what happened for me. And as the self, as the core self, you can listen to this conversation without doing anything else. Because I think one way to make, especially the inner critic, feel safe is to give them the space they want to express themselves, to really actively listen to them. To understand their point of view and to be compassionate towards them. If we do this, we manage to take a little bit of distance from the inner critic. We don't confuse it anymore with us as a whole. We see that is a part that is wounded, and we can speak to it and say, thank you so much for the work you've done so far. I see how valuable it is. I see how much effort this required you. You can take a break now, you can relax, because we can take over. And this is the self speaking, the core self speaking. So this is what happened for me. I recommend you to try this exercise and see what happens for you. This sometimes is not so easy. So it's not so easy to be able to listen to all these parts of yourself, of course. So it sounds like maybe I'm making it sound like it's super easy, but it requires a lot of commitment and bravery, because sometimes the things that come up are not so easy to hear. But anyway, I recommend this work because I started doing this parts work for other reasons. But then when I started doing this parts work and I started listening to the inner critic voice, suddenly something became different, shifted inside me. And now I have easy access to a state of flow pretty much anytime I want it. I nearly forgot an important part. Why is it important to not repress it, to not deny it, to not deny the existence of the inner critic, to not acknowledge it? Because if we repress it, if we hide it, deny it, suppress it, it might end up in our subconscious mind as a shadow part, and as a shadow part, it can really make damage. So Jung said, unless we make the subconscious conscious, it will lead our life, and we will call it fate. So that's the case for people who think, oh, I'm just not creative, I'm just not blessed with this talent, there's nothing I can do about it, it's just not me. And I think, I remember once I've heard a girl saying, I don't have one creative bone in me. And that's impossible, because if you are a human being, then you are creative, you are inherently creative, and you have access to this huge potential of creativity. So yeah, don't repress your inner critic voice, listen to it. Okay, so I think this is it. If you try this exercise, let me know what you think. I hope it helps you like it did with me, because I cannot tell you how nice it feels to be able to express all the creativity that has been like bottled up. It feels like the Pandora jar opened, but it's not a Pandora jar, it's like a cornucopia. I hope you liked it. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you in the next video.